So good morning. Hello and welcome. My name is Tema Staig. I'm the Executive Director of Women in Media. Women in Media promotes gender balance in the film and entertainment industries through networking, professional development, and advocacy for women, women identifying, and gender nonconforming filmmakers who work above and below the line, and the people who love to collaborate with them. Find out more about our events, education, and initiatives via the link which is in the chat, and we'll post it a couple more times so that you can reach out to us and find out more about us. We are absolutely thrilled to co-produce this event with SMPTE. Thank you for joining us. We have incredible artist technicians with us today who have worked on The Mandalorian, The Suicide Squad, and Red Notice, to name a few. We are so excited to find out more about their process and the awesome, ever-changing technology that is fueling the new wave of entertainment. Please join me in welcoming the chairman of SMPTE New York, Connecticut Subsection, Brian Kobylarz.
Hey, thank you so much, Tema. It's an absolute pleasure for SMPTE to partner with Women in Media, Tema, and the entire everybody out there to bring you this event. SMPTE is a global organization. Its membership is a professional society of individuals and companies that promote the advancement of all things technical in the motion picture, television, and digital media industries. While you may know us best from SMPTE color bars to SMPTE timecode, we are much more. It's education, it's development of standards, our technical journal, conferences, and networking through our membership. Browse our website, which will also be listed in the chat window and at the end of the program to find out more. It's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Kari Grubin. Kari has spent the last 20 years leading and managing studio divisions, global post-production facilities, corporate departments, and groups within trade organizations. She was the vice president of mastering for studio operations at the Walt Disney Studios, vice president of post and restoration services at Deluxe Media Services. Kari is the co-chair of Hollywood Professional Association All, the HPA-DEI initiative, and in 2021, Kari was invited to become a member at large by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. Kari currently serves as a project director of SMPTE's Rapid Industry Solutions On-Set Virtual Production Initiative. Kari, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Oh, likewise. Yes, no, thank you. I'm really, really thrilled to be here. I'm here to set the table to kind of get us all on the same page about what we're going to talk about today. So again, welcome everyone to today's program. For those of you that may not be familiar, about a year ago, SMPTE started a new initiative called Rapid Industry Solutions. It provides a neutral, non-commercial platform to facilitate industry solutions, and specifically around on-set virtual production as our first goal and our first area of focus. The purpose of this is so that SMPTE is accountable to the needs of the industry, and we have an industry advisory group that leads the work and provides direction. SMPTE in this process does what it does best. It curates existing deliverables and assets and partners with other industry organizations going far and wide, from VES to the Academy Software Foundation, Movie Labs, and so forth, and then stitches that together and provides the development of new educational offerings as well as enabling systems interoperability. And the process that we go through with RIS, Rapid Industry Solutions, is also allowing SMPTE to understand how it changes and evolves to be of service for its next century of supporting the industry. We have 58 advisory group members, including individual contributors and educational institutions, companies, many of which are actually new to the SMPTE ecosystem. And that is really important as part of the initiative so that we get a wide-ranging view of what's happening in virtual production so that we can truly provide the solutions that are required. The work in the advisory group and in RIS has been very, very busy for the last 8 months. Our advisory group meets once a month. It started in August. We surveyed those members to see what the top issues of concern were. And then we have work that goes on specifically in those areas in 3 work streams: education, interoperability, and outreach. So for today, let's talk about demystifying virtual production. And you're going to hear some great speakers who are going to talk about different facets. We've been doing this work for over a century. It's nothing new. Betty Davis was a pioneer in virtual production, if you can believe it, because they did rear screen projection. We're just using new tools and leveraging that technology to create even more interesting ways to tell stories. But we're using different language for different things. So as an example, we talked about volumetric production. Volumetric production is a component of virtual production, but we all use different words and different things to describe some of these processes, whether it be green screen, mocap, or even using LED walls. You have to work together and spend the time to kind of understand, what the planning process is and how to get the best out of it. And some of our speakers today are going to really get into some of those details to help level set. And ultimately, our goal today is to build a common foundation so that we all start to speak the same language. One of the first things that the SMPTE RIS initiative did was to create a wall chart on virtual production. This was a way for people to have a visualization of what the different buckets and terminology meant. We were very focused on making sure we used common language. So it includes the movie lab, common language for media creation, a visual language. So we're using the same shapes and boxes to tell the story. It was also important for us to include what the skills and knowledge base was. So to start today, we are going to turn it over and we're going to start with part 1 here of the virtual production process, which is the virtual art department. I'm really pleased to introduce Leysan Khabibullina. Leysan is an associate producer at Happy Mushroom, leading the most expansive virtual production projects on the company's roster. Leysan has worked on Disney's Book of Boba Fett, CBS's Why Women Kill, and other projects. Leysan leans on her over a decade of experience managing large-scale international State Department projects in Africa, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and Eastern Europe. She is passionate about education and collaboration with the USC Shoah Foundation, and a nonprofit that utilizes innovative technology for education purposes. Leysan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you to our organizers for making this panel possible. I'm very pleased to be here and talk about Virtual Art Department, or VAD. And I know we use a lot of jargon in the industry to make it easier for us to understand each other, but I think sometimes it makes it less accessible to people who are outsiders. So I'll try to use less slang where possible. So Virtual Art Department is really an extension of a traditional art department. But instead of building sets practically, we build them digitally. And our teams create 3D real-time environments using Unreal Engine. That's really the essence of it. And I have a video here that can help explain what kind of projects that can be useful in. And in the past, we've worked in games, TV, film, interactive experiences, and we work with clients that utilize LED technology, blue screen, and sometimes clients who only use practical sets, and we can still help them with planning. Of course, Mandalorian is a really successful example of utilizing Virtual Art Department. And I think it became so successful and well-known that a lot of people now equivalate VAD with Mandalorian. And sometimes think that if your project is not the scale or has the same type of script as Mandalorian, that VAD is not useful to you. So I think it's really important to highlight that Virtual Art Department can be used in any production that requires planning, which is every production really. And I wanted to highlight one of the projects that we worked on together with CBS, which is Why Women Kill Season 2. This project utilized traditional compositing pipeline. They used blue screen. However, they were benefiting from using VAD because they were able to create their environments faster than a traditional 3D modeling pipeline. They were able to determine what kind of sets will be passed along to VFX, as well as what exactly will be built out, which had an impact on the budget. This project, which we worked on together with Academy, Lux Machina, NANCE, and Epic, was an example of a project that was fairly small and didn't require any bespoke assets that needed to be sculpted by hand. So we used Epic Marketplace and were able to grab all of those assets and create a small environment with a pretty small team on a very tight timeline. So we were still able to customize all of the assets and make them our own and make them fit the story. However, that's a really great way to approach a project if you have a smaller team and a tight timeline. I also wanted to highlight the use of photogrammetry in our pipeline. I think it's really important to be able to bring real life assets into the digital space because it makes it look more real. And in this example, we went to Joshua Tree and scanned some assets and brought them into Unreal. And this created a real life environment in the digital space. And because we work in Unreal, key creatives could come in and make that environment their own. So you can move around those rocks and foliage, and then you can light it for any time of day that you would like. So you can still work in a real-time environment that really exists out there, but you can make it fit your story. This is a chart that actually shows how Unreal Engine fits into the production pipeline, but I think it's a really good representation of how we fit and that fits into this pipeline. So we come in pre-production stage, and we work super closely with the art department from the very get-go. We receive concept art and models, and we ingest them into Unreal. And at first, we concentrate on layout and scale. And once we get sign off on that, we move on to plussing up the environment, adding more details, adding lighting, and we work with set designers to decorate the set. And we basically take it to the fidelity where our clients are comfortable with passing it along to VFX. And then it goes to either LED screens, sometimes traditional compositing pipeline. And like I mentioned earlier, sometimes we work on practical sets. So we create sets digitally so that we can figure out the scale and layout and whether it fits the action. And then we pass it back to the art department so they can build a practical set based on our models. And I want to highlight that we work very closely with previous VFX department, of course, art department, and our key creatives to make sure that what we're building fits the narrative and fits the story. And the way we engage with our key creatives is through virtual location scouting. We deploy VR machines to all of our key creatives, which is especially important now during COVID times, because a lot of people work from home. And this technology allows our key creatives to be in virtual space all together. This is important because they're viewing 3D environment in 3D space, and because they're able to be all together virtually reviewing the set. Because we use Unreal Engine, a lot of the changes that our key creatives are requesting can be made right then and there, so they don't have to wait for the next review to understand whether we're going in the right direction. Having all of the key creatives in one space allows them all to be on the same page in terms of making creative decisions and taking that creative control back so that they know exactly what they will get the day off. I can talk about that forever, honestly, but I know I have limited time, so I'm gonna pass it along to our next presenter. Hi, Sheiva. Sheiva Khalily joined Lux Machina Consulting in 2018 as a virtual production producer. She received her bachelor degree in theater from UCLA and immediately began working as a freelance projection designer in opera and theater. Sheiva worked for the Shanghai Disney Resort as a technical specialist before joining Lux Machina, where she has worked as a producer on award-winning League of Legends World 2020 eSport event. More recently, she led the team designing and installing the virtual production facility at Dexter Studios in South Korea, and she regularly manages the virtual production elements of broadcast and film projects. Thank you, Sheiva, and welcome.
Thank you, Leysan. So I work for Lux Machina. We do technical design, system design, and volume design for virtual production and film and broadcast production, and do our fair share of research and development and software development as well to move the industry forward. And so I'd like to introduce Nicole Voss. Nicole Voss joined Lux Machina in September of 2020 as a senior technical specialist, working primarily on the virtual production systems that Lux Machina is installing throughout the world. She has already played a lead role in designing, testing, and installing the Nant Studios virtual production stage in Los Angeles, the Warner Brothers stage at Leavesden Studio in the UK, and is currently working on NEP Virtual Studios' very own Prism stage at Trilith Studios in Atlanta, Georgia. Nicole joined Lux Machina with almost a decade of experience working as a stage technician, media server specialist, and senior video system designer for both Disney and Universal Studios. Please join me in welcoming Nicole.
I'm so happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk about the technical side of virtual production and what it takes to get content from the computer to the screen. I'm going to try to put a lot of information into here in a short period of time, so I hope that I'm able to shed a little bit of light on this ever-evolving process. So I'm going to talk about volume design. As Kari mentioned, there's a lot of ways that virtual production can be used. I'm going to focus on LED because that's what I've been doing a lot of over the past couple of years. So there's some things that we consider when we determine the size and shape of a volume. The volumes that we can design depend on the needs of the studio or a particular production. We have full high-end volumes that comprise of an arc of LED, so similar to what we see on the screen here, somewhere around 270 degrees of coverage. It can have a ceiling that caps that arc. And in addition, it can have a wall that creates a seal for 360-degree space for a production to work inside of. These are usually used for a lot of film or episodic television, and there's other volumes that are just two upright walls and a floor, which are used a lot more for broadcast or on-air productions. So when we start a design, we think about how much coverage are we going to need for camera tracking system so that the camera tracking can move throughout the space and never lose connection to the system. Another thing that I want to talk about is what do we look for in an LED tile. So in an LED tile, we're going to look at resolution, pixel pitch. Is it small enough to create a believable image in camera? Does it cause moire, which is the fighting of the LED versus the camera sensor? We're looking at the nit, which is the screen going to be bright enough? And is it going to offer enough intensity to output the lighting fixture and also be a good visual display? Does it have an achievable color gamut? Can the LED actually produce the correct color spectral range or for the desired color space? And we're also looking at the field of view because the LED is actually made up of RGB diodes. The color shifts because of the physical obstruction of the LED by the shader or the material that is surrounding the LED. So I'm going to talk again next about the video pipeline. So this is my favorite part. This is how do we get the content from the VAD that Leysan was talking about onto the actual screen in a way that represents creative vision as accurately as possible from a technical standpoint. So at the heart of the system, we have a rendering system. This provides real-time playback for the virtual scene. The render output then sends it to an HDMI router. It'll go through the router to the LED processors, and then the LED will drive that wall. The HDMI router is also used to send those same rendered screens to a screens management system, where we can see all of the outputs from the rendered system at once for confidence. We also like to use a KVM system, which is a keyboard video mouse system, so that the operators and engineers can control and interact with the machines that are the control machines and the render machines. The most important part of the system for me is the master clock. So this uses timing signals to synchronize the entire system, including the camera tracking, rendering, LED, and finally the cameras that capture the footage. Sort of without that, all of this sort of falls apart and you lose the realism of it. The next thing I'm going to squeeze in is our network. This is our computer network. So this encompasses the entire system. A good practice that we like to use is to break the system up into smaller networks so that only communication passes through these networks for relevant devices. where was I? We have Unreal render system that connects the control system, the renders. We have a content network that connects our VAD content so it can be downloaded and uploaded to the render systems. We have a camera tracking network where the virtual camera data can be passed from camera tracking to the control and render systems. And we have an engineering system, which is sort of everything else. It's the other various devices, such as the screens management and the LED processors and the KVM controllers and routers. So it's everything else that we need to talk to, we'll put in this engineering thing. So I know I talked about a lot. I put a lot of keywords out there. I hope that I'm able to sort of shed some light on the super technical part of it. And obviously I love to talk about it. So I'm looking forward to your questions. Combining this powerful real-time rendering system and a robust network is how we can create a solid foundation for creative and production teams to put together the best possible product. So now I would like to introduce Kristin Turnipseed, my colleague. She joined Machina in 2022 as a virtual production supervisor. She graduated from the Digital Animation and Visual Effects School in Orlando, Florida, before quickly getting a job as a post-viz artist at Halon Entertainment. During her 6 years at Halon, Kristin advanced through the ranks, helping productions conceptualize their ideas in pre-visualization and ultimately finding her niche as a virtual camera stage supervisor. She's contributed to films like Logan, Ford vs. Ferrari, and The Batman, among others. At Lux Machina, she contributes as a virtual production supervisor, where she takes part in helping to advance virtual production workflows and technology, and assisting creative filmmakers in all departments to harness the power of virtual productions for their projects. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you, Nicole. And you did great. This is a wonderful introduction. And I love hearing about the very technical side of everything that Nicole and her team is doing, because it so well complements everything that, that I kind of help take over once we get everything going. So with that, so yes, once we get on site, we've got a project going and Nicole and her team has spent a lot of time building out and planning and testing these systems. Depending on what a client might want, we begin going in and building everything. All the equipment is ordered and it's there. And we take all that hard work that Nicole and her team has done and we begin installing everything. We start plugging it in and we start hooking it all up and it starts to actually take form. And throughout the process, along the way where you're testing the system in compartmentalized way to help debug any issues, because the system becomes just so complex, as you've seen in Nicole's presentation, that we want to make sure that we are putting the system together in exactly the way prescribed and that it works exactly as needed for that project and for that build. And eventually, what was once a giant empty studio space will go from these schematics and large emptiness and to somewhat what you see here to this, and you'll have an entire stage built. This might be recognizable to some from some epic test footage, but this is a wall setup, and this is fully with environment and everything built in. But you've also got all your camera equipment, and seeing the process of a stage come alive is a lot of fun. Also happening in tandem with the design and build process is ongoing discussions with the creative team. Not everyone approaches virtual production with as in-depth a knowledge as what we have, which is why we make ourselves available and we're there to answer any questions that a director might have, or a DP, production designer. Sometimes people are just curious. Sometimes there's a unique problem that needs to be solved. And sometimes there's, maybe a little bit of apprehension because they're just not as familiar with the technology behind it. And all of that is okay, because we strive to have these conversations to answer these questions, to help translate creative ideas into concrete solutions that we can execute, and to make sure that everyone's needs are being met. We want, for creatives, we want these workflows, and we want the whole process to feel as natural to them, or as close to their natural process as possible. And so throughout pre-production, we discuss unique needs of the environment. We'll discuss what tools they might want to have in hand,
on the day. And then we'll try to find ways to either meet that or provide solutions that can kind of help transition the practical filmmaking to the virtual filmmaking and help along that way. We also work very, very closely with VAD at the time. So we'll have a lot of conversations with, say, Leysan and her team to make sure that, you know, as content is being delivered to the wall and to the on-site team, that everything is opening up and looking as they expect it to. The VAD teams have put so much hard work into their into the art that they've done. We want to make sure that it's represented correctly. Also for the clients, this is an exciting time because it's the first time they get to view content on the wall. It starts to feel very real for them. And then through a process of going back and forth with the VADs and the creatives, we fine tune and we make a plan and we have something that is ready for shoot day. So then we get to our shoot, and as most people that have been on a film set know, this is where chaos begins, but with a certain amount of planning, we help to mitigate a lot of that. Our on-site team, what you see here is an example of, you know, a team that we might bring to the stage. Of course, this might flex based on the needs of a show. Shows can be, you know, we suit the needs of the show. Virtual production is not a one unit thing, it can be modulated. So this is an example of those teams. We've got, you know, a virtual production supervisor, that would be my position, and our producer. And from there, we've got all of, you know, a number of branches that are responsible for helping to make sure that content is ready on the day that it's supposed to be shot. We have artists that are there to help execute, adding effects and recording everything and responding to color correction notes that might be coming in from the creatives. We also have people on board to make sure that our camera tracking is correct. That way we have tracked cameras for output, make sure that the system is healthy in a way that, you know, make sure all our LEDs, all of the stuff that Nicole and the team has built and spent so much time planning every detail, making sure that the health of those systems are maintained and available to troubleshoot any issues that might come up along the way. And then along with that, you know, we're also all there to help support the creative vision and enable the execution of these ideas. The nice thing about virtual production is that because so much planning goes into your shoot day, it provides room for spontaneous ideas because you've had a chance to troubleshoot, to test ideas that might not have worked or come up with other ideas. But because you've made this level of planning, there's room for spontaneous ideas and the creative solutions that go along with those. You know, adding effects, color corrections, animation, or, you know, edits to what those might be. And along the way, we catalog all of these things for later recall. That way, if we need to go back in for reshoots, everything in the environment that was as it was on the day of your shoot can just be pulled right back up. Should you want to do reshoots, or if you want to make part 2. We have all that saved and ready along the way for recall later down the line. On the spot troubleshooting is definitely something that we all do along the way. We definitely try to you know, prevent any of that, but if you don't plan for things to go wrong, then something probably already has. And then part of what I do is also just make sure not only that my team has everything. Thanks. And the last thing I do, and one of the more important things, is to just make sure that not only my team has what they need to be as effective as possible so that they can support the production, but then also make sure that the production is comfortable, they have what they need, they feel, you know, they know what to expect on the day, and they're able to you know, just have their ideas and do what they do best without having to worry about the technology that's happening behind it, because I'm there to help translate that. And most of all, we have fun. I mean, we're making movies. It's what we're supposed to be doing. And to help illustrate a little bit of what we've been discussing, we have also prepared a very quick reel to tie some of these ideas together in a more visual way. So as you can see, kind of along the way, there's a lot of planning, you know,
per the needs of each production, we will kind of design the volume, as Nicole has mentioned. We build our teams as needed, and along the way, there's build processes as well. And let me see. There's a lot of equipment that will end up going into building out building out a stage. I mean, obviously there's a lot of, you know, technical work. There's everything needs to be plugged in. So Nicole, I'd be curious to know exactly how many pounds of just cabling and wires alone end up going into building a stage.
Oh my gosh, miles at least. Apparently our video is having a little issue, but we'd love to show this a little better. Oh, there, hey, look, there I am.
Oh, look, it's Nicole.
Yeah, we've got miles of power cable, network cable, fiber optics. We use a lot of fiber optics. Get back to you.
So we've just had, sorry about that video, that's on me. We've just had a ton of experts tell you about how this process comes together, but we didn't get here overnight. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. So we're going to look at some past case studies, and just to look before the version of virtual production that comes with game engines and all of that. We're going to review Oblivion and Solo: A Star Wars Story, which occurred with 2D playback on projection surfaces, and these mirrored the process stages that were used in films like The Birds and Wizard of Oz. So these aren't new processes, but have continued to improve over time. So these are two projects that really put virtual production on the map and like got people excited about using these more inclusive environments of virtual production and of interactive lighting, and getting actors really into the space. And then with the Project Mandalorian, we got to a point where we could really use LED and LED camera tracking and game engines to push virtual production to the next level. So a few things allowed for this to happen. Epic worked really hard on the Unreal Engine and worked with us to create virtual production tools for this. So suddenly game engines were at a point of being photoreal and wanting to push virtual production to the next level. In addition, LED technology reached a point where pixel pitches were looking good on camera, providing enough color variation, and enabled us to use interactive lighting. Additionally, camera tracking technology reached a point of reliability where these three things could be put together to create a fully immersive environment. With this project, League of Legends Worlds 2020, we were able to take all of this and combine it with our broadcast experience to create something that we like to call live. This was shot live, composited live, with live camera switching and live interactive game data coming from the players, all being broadcast live at the same time. We created 240 hours of live content here. I've said the word live several times now, but we tried to mimic a broadcast environment and allow for multi-camera frustum switching. So that means that if we had 4 cameras on this stage, and the same way a director would call cameras in a broadcast environment, we were able to call cameras in this environment and switch which camera was in control of not only the frustum on the LED space, but the AR plate that was coming on top of it. So you can see in these two pictures, we had an LED stage, and then we had an AR set extension on top of that to create this infinite world in a fairly small sound stage. And the artistic teams of this project really pushed the boundaries. They used this LED stage to push the envelope of what could be created in virtual production, and weren't limited by the geometry of the stage in any way. So all this to say that virtual production is intended to improve our filmmaking process, but it's not intended to change it entirely. We're not looking to fully replace our green screen processes or any of that. Here's a production. Marshmallow did the opening ceremony for the UEFA finals in 2021. And this was all shot on a blue screen stage. And we used virtual production to create a new and improved blue screen stage in which the director and the choreographer could see where the talent would land in the environment live. And so this was all using these same principles of virtual production, but in a new way. And lastly, I'd like to review the Prism stages is creating this this new volume at Trilith. A lot of production houses are creating these permanent volumes in which productions can just come in and do things, but we're really trying to use all of the lessons that we've learned over our time doing this to create the state-of-the-art studio. And I think we'll be seeing a lot more of these. So throwing it back to Tema and Brian.
That was fantastic.
It absolutely was.
Absolutely fantastic.
I love that. Thank you so much, Sheiva, and everybody else who gave us your presentations. Very, very cool. We have a few questions, so thank you. I have a quick question for you. For everybody, I would like to know, what do you think is next in the world of virtual production, and what do you think will continue to push the industry forward?
Oh, I definitely have some ideas there. I think pushing this boundary of multi-camera workflows, using things like Ghost Frame to be able to shoot 2 cameras at a time on a virtual production stage will really benefit us, and further automation of things like our color pipelines and color workflows so that we could create uniformity across the industry.
Yeah, I'm really excited about, I mean, I'm cautious about kind of, crystal balling the future because tech just moves so fast. So there might be something that that is released tomorrow that we'll all see in our toolkits a year from now. And it just moves so lightning quick. I also really like visualization becoming a faster process and a more fluid process as well. I think the visualization not only assists, the previous process assists in VAD because it also helps to kind of proof an environment if you get a chance to go in there and add actors and characters and blocking and all of these things in a very real and tangible way. I like that, and with easier access to VCam setup, you can set something up with something as simple as a Vive and a puck on a stick, and you can hand that to a director and say, all right, start visualizing your movie so that VAD knows what angles are we going for. Editorial can start cutting something together. Everyone can start working on this very easily and have a clear picture prior to going into production. I think that the more that this workflow gets picked up, it'll make filmmaking, it'll change a lot. I like that.
It sounds like pre-production is key, like absolutely key.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I mean, a lot of people do say, fix it and prep, and it's never been more true. I know that to a lot of creatives that might be a little scary, right? Because some of the decisions, like if you're not ready to take that decision, that's fine. So you kind of set that for later. You can kind of still do that. It does pull a lot of that decision making earlier. But the nice thing about that is that you can make a decision, and if it's not working for you, you can change your mind, and you can change your mind and change your mind again because you're in prep and you're not in post. And you have the flexibility.
So day one for virtual art department is really key to having a successful project beginning to end.
Really, I mean, and I'll let Leysan speak more to it, but the sooner that VAD can start on a project, the better.
Okay.
And I think that VAD will become more and more common in projects because, as I mentioned earlier, even if you are not planning on using even digital environments, planning your project ahead of time and not having surprises the day off is really key. So a lot of times we do work on sets that are never meant to be digital. We plan them out so that we can kick them back to the art department so that they know exactly what to build. And that reduces waste, because sometimes you build an environment physically, you come in and you're like, that's not actually what we need, and no one wants that. And I think key to this is educating key creatives about how this process works, because I think it can be scary. And again, like, we use so many terms that are new to key creatives who've been in the industry for a long time, and they might think that this is in some way replaces them or takes away their creative control, but it actually gives them that creative control back, because they can make those decisions together with other partners, other key creatives, so that there are no surprises the day off. And again, this is something that you can use for projects that use LED screens, use blue screens, use practical sets. And I think education here and panels like this are key to explain how this process can be utilized in your specific project.
Okay. How does one budget for this? What are the considerations?
When it comes to VAD, and I think, so when it comes to VFX, a lot of times you would bid out based on environment or based on shots. And so VAD, because we come in pre-production before there's really a script or a final script, and before we know all of the environments that will be on our plate, the way you would bid it out is based on labor and based on the duration of time that you want VAD to be a part of your project. And it really depends on the size of your project, how many people you would like to be part of VAD, and how long you want VAD to be a part of the project. But there is really no way for us to bid it out based on environments. You have to bid it out based on labor. And one of the things that VAD does when we come in is help you determine what environments will end up practical, what environments would work on LED screen. So sometimes we ingest the environment, we take a look at it, we start working on it, and then determine that, no, it's not going to work on the LED screen. So again, it's really hard to figure out in pre-production what kind of environments will end up in VAD all the way through the pipeline and what don't. So you just bid it out based on the team, basically hours and duration of the team on the project.
From the Lux standpoint, we're looking at three things as well. One is a design phase, so some sort of consulting contract of designing the LED volume and as designing the system around the specific production's needs. And then we're looking at gear rental or gear purchase, which is the big ticket item here. This stuff does not come cheap, but it ends up saving money long term oftentimes. And then we're looking at on-set labor, and that is dependent on the number of days that we're shooting and the amount of time it takes to prep a volume or prep a system.
I'd really like to jump in here though and help to kind of drive the point that a lot of this is also based on your project. I mean, not every project needs a whole Mandalorian wall. Not every project can get by with just off-screen lighting and reflections and needs a little bit more. Sometimes there's gimbals involved. Sometimes there's camera tracking that are where you're doing multicam. You know, it might be an event, it might be a film, it might be a series, who knows? And so really where it does start is with your ideas. The better you're able to communicate what it is you want, even if it's just like, here's a script, or here's just like some ideas, here's a back of a napkin, like I want it to look like this and yada, yada. If we can understand what challenges you might be running into or help identify what challenges you might run into with some of your ideas, then we're better able to give you an idea of what a budget for this, what you might need. All of us here are very aware that this is still very new for a lot of filmmakers. And so if we're given the opportunity, we love to take the time to help talk you through. We suggest this, and this is why. This is what it will do. This is what it will help. This is, you know, the things that you need to take into consideration. And client education is a big thing, I think, for all of us here, and we're all happy to take the time to do it. And workshops just like this are exactly great formats for that. So, but if you have a specific project, you know, go and talk to Leysan and her team, or give Sheiva a call and let us know what you need. And then we're better able to come up with as close to a prescription and a recommendation list as possible.
Hey, folks. So we've got a ton of questions for you. Our incredible professionals have sparked so much in our home audience's imagination that so many people want to ask you their questions. So Scotty Jeanette has gotten them. She's fielding them, and she's going to ask some questions for you, if that's okay. Scotty Jeanette, come on down.
Well, hello, everyone. I hope you will understand what these initials are. Nicole, this is to you. Do you ever use NDI?
I have used NDI in the past. We haven't used it so much in these situations because it's still sort of we try to use sort of more reliable at this point. So like we found that HDMI signal is a little bit more reliable for us, but in certain situations, NDI can be used. We just haven't, not in our systems currently, yeah.
I actually got a call like 3 days ago to incorporate NDI into a project. So coming up, Nicole, I'm actually going to ask you about that later.
No, great. Actually, I haven't used, to be completely honest, I haven't actually used NDI for a couple of years. We used to use it when I was doing projection systems at Disney for castle shows and stuff. We used to do it so that we can have streaming out of like After Effects or something content, and then we use that to map that onto like a building or castle or something. But at that time, it wasn't super reliable, and to be honest, I haven't had the chance to kind of jump back into it. So I'm really excited to see. I know they've made a lot of changes, so I'm looking forward to taking on that challenge. Yeah.
And I see we get the answer in the chat, but for those of us who don't know what NDI is, can you spell that out, please?
Oh yeah, network device interface. So it's basically it's a lot of video over network protocol. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So Kirby Washington says that I worked as a camera operator on a handful of motion capture features some years ago. Is there still work for cam ops these days?
Yes. Yes, there is. Absolutely. Actually, oh, sorry, my chair was tipping backwards. Kirby, I want to give you a little bit of hope here. I was very excited when I saw this question pop up. Yes, I actually just rolled off of a project where we spent 6 months. So it's a mixed practical and CG film feature. And the camera operator, who was our on-set operator, also transitioned into doing our digital wheels pass. So we were getting final cameras out of Unreal on our full CG section. And we had our camera operator, using like a Noto wheels from his home, no less, because everyone was remote on this project. And so from his home using a digital wheels process, and again, trying to make the process as natural for him as possible, right? So you've got like the weight of the wheels and all of these things. He had a bunch of devices and sliders and everything just to try to bring his like natural work process home. And be able to transition that into a full digital environment. So absolutely, yes. Camera operators are, there's definitely ways for camera operators to interact with virtual production. He also found it very helpful, even for on-set stuff. A lot of visualization also enables tech viz. So we were able to sit down with him and discuss a lot of things about, techno crane moves. There's a camera in previs. Can the techno crane get to those limits, or how can we, how does that move fit in with the techno dolly and the techno crane and all of those things? So a lot of that kind of planning also goes in ahead of time. So yes, to answer your question, there is still work for camera operators out there in this new virtual production field, and there will be more ways of coming soon.
I also think
you made Kirby very happy there.
Oh, good.
I think it is important to point out that camera operators are a lot of what sell virtual production. We can only do so much. At the end of the day, it's the use of the space that really drives it home. And on League of Legends especially, I like really need to credit that camera team, because they took on that challenge of using this fully immersive environment that was, a lot of it was was AR. And so they were experiencing things like looking away from the stage and still being able to see content. And so they really explore the boundaries of that. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for camera operators to continue pushing this forward.
Great.
Fantastic. Well, we've had a few people ask the same question. Do you always build a new LED wall from scratch on a project, or can you reuse the same wall for different projects?
Oh, we definitely can reuse the LED. Yeah. Some of the projects that we've been doing are actually like permanent installations because they're going into studios. So film and television projects will kind of go in and out. But a lot of things we do, we take LED from rental stock and we're building, you know, on site wherever they might be building, in a warehouse or in a studio or whatever. So it could definitely be both.
Yeah, we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time. If we can use an already existing volume, we will. It saves the production a good chunk of money.
Yeah, and Sheiva, as you mentioned in your presentation, there's the Trilith volume that's going in that will be a permanent installation, the largest one at the time that it opens, I believe.
Yeah, and that's fully designed for rentals, for a production to come in, utilize that space for as long as they need, whether it be a week or several months.
I think for right now, it's kind of a combination of both. I mean, there are permanent installations, but if a production wants to, you know, build in, you know, a specific location or to specific specifications, then that can happen as well.
If I can tuck in a question here, one of the terms that was brought up during the presentations was immersive lighting. What is immersive lighting for those that don't know, and how do you end up lighting actors and other people that are involved in the volume so that this way it appears real?
Well, so when we're designing a volume, we're looking at not only what will be seen on camera, but what will be shining on the actors themselves, or whether that be anything on stage. So whether that's a car window, or a person's face, or someone's sunglasses sitting on their forehead. We're looking at where we can put an LED ceiling or LED panels them beside the camera, so that we are looking at sampling from that same volume or that same space that the VAD team designed, and using that to influence the lighting. So if we're looking at a sunset sky, for example, we're seeing that lighting from the sunset, from the ceiling or from the front light, and we're getting that on the actors or on, you know, their sunglasses or whatever, to make that a little bit more immersive. Because at the end of the day, LED panels are lighting instruments. They emit light.
Yeah. I want to kind of jump in really quick because Brad asked a question that sort of ties into this. And so Scotty, Jeanette, I hope it's okay that I tie this in. He asked about how we deal with the spectral limitations of RGB video for light on camera talent. And it's a problem that we're actually still actively working through, because there are spectral limitations on LED. And sometimes the answer is education. So we just need to talk to the DP, talk to who else is on site, and tell them, you know, we do have limitations, we're working through it. A lot of times what we'll do is just bring in lighting fixtures that can fill in that spectrum, that are actually on set, so that the LED is just an addition for reflections or something, and it's not actually the active lighting on the person.
And if I can just jump in really quickly, I know that this is gonna kind of sidebar, but this example is really, really good, and maybe preemptively answering other questions. For anyone that's interested in like getting into virtual production and getting into this, what Nicole just pointed out is a perfect example of like, we don't have all the answers yet. The technology is not fully done yet. I don't know if it ever will be. It's always gonna be a moving target. And so for anybody looking to get into this kind of field, we need you. Like, we need ideas, we need concepts, we need people to bounce ideas off. We all feed off of each other across companies, across disciplines, across all of these things. We all bounce ideas off of each other and, you know, come up with stuff together. And that's how the industry grows and technology grows. So, you know, for anybody that thinks like, oh, well, it's already there, it's already done, it's built. No, it's most definitely not. There's still things that we're working through and things that need to be solved. And we need, we need additional brains because we've come a long way, but we won't go all the way to, without working together on it. So.
Yeah. How would
On
somebody
the
get
heels of that,
involved?
Tema, hold on just a second. While we're here, we are getting a lot of questions about how the camera reacts to. So, like, is there a standard formula for avoiding moire, or how do you deal with that?
There aren't exactly standards here yet. There are a handful of ways to avoid moire. Essentially, you want to keep the LED out of focus. And there are multiple ways to do that, but moire occurs when your camera is trying to focus on individual pixels of LED. So it's a lot of trial and error to get there. And based on our experiences, we have a handful of ways to do that by creating additional space between your subject and your LED, or by using different lenses. But the goal is to keep the LED out of focus.
I wanted to jump in here real fast too, to say too, this is part of some of the work that the RIS initiative is doing, which is taking thought leadership from people like the women who are speaking here, to start to understand where the challenges are, and then bringing thought leaders together. So as an example, the SMPTE Hollywood section did a presentation before the new year that Tim Kane and Paul Devevic did, that is all about spectral lighting in LED volumes. I recommend that you go look for that. It will talk about some of those areas that we know, because there's definite missing color spectrum that gets emitted from the LED walls. We're looking at some of those types of problems across the gamut, no pun intended, but across the whole ecosystem, to see how we start to bring those questions together and then provide the solutions. And that's where RIS as an initiative kind of sits. So I would highly encourage you to look through not only representatives that are part of the ecosystem, but start to look through, there's a lot of presentations going on with different SMPTE entities, to start to help bringing that information to users in the space, because there is quite a bit of crossover from broadcast to creative and scripted content creation and so forth, from live event and pre-recorded. So there are some really good resources that are starting to be pulled together as part of the RIS initiative, and by local SMPTE chapters, just like the New York chapter.
Okay, we have a quick definition here. Can someone please explain frustum, and also what is frustum switching?
Yeah, so sorry. The frustum is what the camera sees. So, it's anything that's inside of your camera's aspect ratio. Of course, we can then overscan what that is. But in terms of an LED volume, it is, if you've got your camera and it's pointed at the wall, what the frustum is displaying on the wall is the pixels that the end display system, or that the LED system is going to try to render at a higher resolution and with full effects and everything. Outside of that, outside of what your frustum is on the wall, what the system will do is it'll actually keep those pixels static, so it's not getting the camera tracked motion. It keeps it at a lower resolution as well, but you're still getting the reflections and the lighting that are still true to your environment from everything outside of the frustum. So the frustum is just a representation of the pixels that are going inside your camera. And I'll let Sheiva go into frustum switching.
So I'll use the example League of Legends, because I was there, and it's a cool project. But because we were trying to mimic a broadcast environment, we needed to be able to have the opportunity for the director to switch cameras the same way they would in any broadcast show. So we had 4 cameras on set, and the director was actually off site. And so when the director would call a camera switch, an OSC trigger would be sent that we would take into the Unreal Engine and switch the camera that was being tracked. So that allowed us to, as Kristin explained, the frustum was being essentially projected onto the LED wall, so that what you were seeing in camera was moving in perspective. as the camera would move throughout this 3D environment. And as the director would call for the camera to switch, we would change which camera was being tracked in real time so that the LED wall would change what was appearing in perspective. So that as soon as the next camera would be broadcast live, we were seeing that camera was capturing, like continuously capturing in perspective in that 3D environment. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm sure there's 5 more questions pop up with each answer we get here. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit because we have some people who really want to talk about, they've come from the physical production. I guess this is a general question to the entire panel. What would you recommend for someone, and particularly someone who is, you know, the camera teams and VFX who never been on this kind of production? How would they get into it? How would they get trained?
I don't know if there's like volumes or formats like this are fantastic for it. I really would like to say though, I mean, unless you're looking to actually get on the controls and operate, the best way for you, if as a physical production person, to keep doing what you're doing, but on a virtual production, right? Because virtual production is production with just extra modules and components that bring new tools in. If you're looking to keep doing what you're doing, but on a virtual production, I think the best way to do it is not only listen in on these conversations, but if you have the opportunity to visit like a demo space or to go and play with some of these tools, if you know somebody that has a volume and you get a chance to go in there and just move a camera around and get a sense of what you're going to see on the wall and how things react, like she was talking about, things like Moray, it's a lot of just trial and error. And just because trial and error worked on like one environment, you might get another environment. It might be Moray from, you know, like a fence or something that's at a certain angle, and that's where it's coming from. It's going to be based on a lot of different components that you're just going to want to go in and get a feel for it. For anyone that actually wants to get in and operate and dive into Unreal and actually like, you know, come work on our teams, Epic does have a lot of great training resources that I would point everyone to, not only for 427, but UE5 is out, and it's a very exciting time for all of us. And so on their website, you can find a lot of really, really great and full tutorials on there for anyone who really wants to get in and operate the stuff. But again, for practical, for people who are kind of working in the more practical departments, find someone working in virtual production, ping, you know, reach out to someone and just see if you can set up time in like a demo space, or if you know of a production in process, you know, politely ask if you can, and go and check out the set, go check out their shoot and watch what's going on, because that's really exposure and experience is going to be the way to do it. But have an open mind and be open to what you might see.
Yeah,
I think that there's also a middle step here too, right? You mentioned Unreal and Epic Games and that being available. And it is something that Unreal is free. You can go and download it. These virtual production tools are available to you. Even an iPhone, you know, if you want to set an iPhone up and point it at a computer monitor, like you can actually start working with these tools and start understanding what it is without having to physically be on a set. So
for that, yeah, I would also second that. Unreal has a lot of tools and courses that are available to anyone. That is still fairly new. And so I don't think that I've ever hired anyone who already had experience in that. I don't think I've ever had a resume come across my desk that, oh, I've worked in that. We hire artists who come from VFX, come from gaming backgrounds, and we hire managers and producers who come from sometimes physical production or sometimes come from a completely different industry. I worked for State Department international programs. I didn't know anything about production before I joined. And your experience in managing and producing, we're really looking for people who are good managers, and that skill set is translatable between different industries. And for artists too, again, you can look into taking courses in Unreal Engine. We have multiple artists in our studio who are self-taught. So they did not go to any kind of specific courses to learn Unreal Engine. And again, a lot of artists come from backgrounds that are not, all of our artists come from backgrounds that are not in that specifically.
Yeah, I think a lot of the early adopters of like Unreal for virtual production and visualization are self-taught. I'm self-taught in Unreal. The school I went to didn't teach Unreal at the time that I went there. So, I'm sure that, all of us have run across people or ourselves are, self-taught in one way or another in a lot of these packages, because again, it's just so new.
Yeah, and I want to say too that this is one of the big challenges that we're very empathetic about, because if you don't live in a geographic location that has a stage, getting to be on a stage and see it in person is very, very difficult. So we encourage people to look at where your discipline is. If you're a producer, start to look online at the Producers Guild. If you're a director, the Directors Guild. An artist, the Visual Effects Society, and SIGGRAPH, or if you're a gamer through SIGGRAPH, the ASC, if you're international, both the EBU and SMPTE in the UK and so forth. There are places to go for resources. And again, in partnership where SMPTE is trying to facilitate, is trying to bring all that information together. So that people have a place to at least go to a landing page to say, where do I start? Because that's a big challenge, not only for people who are professionals already working in this ecosystem, but also to people who are students and coming up and trying to decide what they want to do. How do you provide that as a resource so that people at least have a place to start and know that there are new game engines that are coming on? Obviously, Epic and Unreal is really probably one of the biggest in the space, but Unity is right there too. I mean, Unity is where this all started with Lion King and Jungle Book. So know that there are a lot of different programs, and if you can get past the fear or the obstacle of being able to go out to look for things, there's a wealth of information. And again, SMPTE is dedicated to pushing that information out so that whatever fits your area of expertise, you have a place to enter so that you can see where you fit into participating in this new form of production. Because it is just production, just using some fancy new tools that didn't exist maybe 5 years ago.
I hope that there's several people have asked various angles of this question. So I hope that we've answered a lot of your questions in this last couple of seconds. There's some people that want to kind of get the conversation back into some of the technical aspects of this. But one last point for the people who are trying to find a way in, is there some other way that we can maybe work together, SMPTE and Women in Media, to help give people opportunities to actually get up on it? One of the questions that's coming in from some of the engineers are saying, particularly from the engineering side, whereas as an engineer, can they get their hands on this in this capacity so that they're not doing this at the risk of someone's production? So is there?
I can actually answer that for a second. We actually do have a virtual production pipeline list that we send out in our newsletter from time to time so that our members are able to sign up if they have interest. And then we actually send that to people, to the HR teams at virtual production stages with that information. All you do is you add your Women in Media crew list profile, a little bit of information and your interest, and then we just send that off to the people in a position to hire. So you may be getting a phone call if you have filled out that form. I'll put the form in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll also add that we are through Rapid Industry Solutions working on educational content, so that especially from a technical side, that you can get that education, but it will hopefully be broader to cover, depending on your level of technical expertise, to cover, outside of something specifically engineering related. So watch for, as part of the Media Technology Summit in October, some programming that will lead up to that for people to start to get their feet wet and start to get some practical knowledge, and then hopefully some on-site, on-hands type of opportunities for learning. We're not prepared to announce specifically what that will be, but that is something that over the next few months you'll be able to hear about as part of the offering, and that may roadshow as well beyond the Media Technology Summit, depending on the popularity.
So Sheiva, there's one last question. Everybody's fascinated by your, the virtual production broadcast. The question is, was it disorienting to those who were on the set when the background would change as the cameras switched?
We actually had to test that multiple times, because at the end of the day, League of Legends is a video game tournament. And so we had to test it with each of the players to make sure that the changing and the brightness were wouldn't affect their gameplay. But no, it wasn't too bad, because at the end, like all the changes were behind them. So so the reason that we track a frustum, going back to the basics, the reason that we track the frustum and not the rest of the scene, as Kristin had explained earlier, is because if we were to track the entire volume based on the camera movement, it would be really disorienting. But because it's just a rectangle essentially of what is in the camera view, it wasn't quite as disorienting. And it was the same effect essentially as like, if we're doing a wide shot, we don't have, you know, intense whip pans where everything's moving, because that would be disorienting to the viewer as well. Typically, a lot of those faster motions are tighter, and so then it's a lot smaller of movement. Doing it live was challenging, I will say that.
Okay, and so we're getting questions: what hardware do you use for camera tracking? Hardware.
We've used pretty much everything, I feel like, at this point. Mostly package systems, right? So Stipe, OptiTrack, Vicon are a lot of the systems that we use.
Okay.
For that, a lot of the times it depends on the production. We do a good amount of R&D with all these different these different forms of camera tracking to determine what would be best in what environment. So if we're looking for speed, we'll go in one direction. If we're looking for accuracy, we go in another direction. So it really depends on the production.
Okay. Before we give it over to Kari for the conclusion, because I know we're going to run out of time here more quickly than I ever hoped. I know that I could ask questions myself for the next couple of hours. But one more from me at the moment is, you talked about resolution, you talked about moire. Have you ended up finding that working at a certain resolution from the camera side, whether it be 4K, 8K, what is best for not only developing the plates, but also once you're in the volume?
I guess to kind of touch a little bit into this, it depends on your goal with the plates, right? Like, so the shots you're getting, I mean, you might want to use a higher resolution camera because you're looking for, you know, you're not going to defocus your background as much, or there's detail back there that you need to keep. And so you really want to get that. At the same time, if you're, you know, if the shot you're getting is, you know, over the shoulder, or, you know, it's close up, it's super out of focus, like it really is, what is the goal of the shots that you're trying to get? And overall on the project will help better determine the resolution. There's different ways to attack the problem of moire, whether it's a matter of, you know, defocusing, or maybe it's something in the environment that's causing it. So maybe if we just shift angles, or if we shift that piece just a tiny bit, problem solved. There's a combination of things. And so depending kind of on the resolution of the camera, we can do a little bit more of this and less of that. But then it's also very much determined by, again, what are you trying to capture? Like what's more important to the creative team to keep in that plate? versus like where can we make those compromises. But because of the flexibility of the system, because we have a couple different ways of approaching it, that's really a conversation that needs to be had. You let us know what resolution you want, and we'll help prescribe like a solution for the moire for when it is happening, because it's not always going to be a thing. Sometimes it's a glance, sometimes it's your angle to the wall itself. Sometimes it's a piece of geometry's angle to the camera. It has to be diagnosed first, and then we can
there's also another part of this, which is what is the resolution of the actual screen? Because there's like a cost versus resolution problem, right? The bigger your volume, the more product you're going to need, which means that if you have a small pitch product, you're going to need more resolution and more rendering, right? So there's a little bit of balance there. Sometimes we'll use maybe a middle pitch product so that there's not as much resolution for the screen. So you sort of have to balance that with the solutions that Kristin was saying.
Kari, can we turn it over to you to do a wrap up to talk about RIS one more time before we bring Tema back in?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly. Yeah, I have to say, I mean, what a wonderful conversation and so many questions. I really think, you know, that we've just started to scratch the surface of what virtual production means. And it can mean broadcast, it can mean live events and sports, it can mean gaming, it can mean your favorite episodic or movie. It has an ever evolving perception. But the one thing that you probably have all heard through everything we've talked about is this is a return to discipline. The way that you are successful in leveraging virtual production tools is by being disciplined and thinking ahead of time. And not every production is going to be able to do that. So you'll have to evaluate as you start to look at these tools. As much as you may want to use an LED volume, if you don't have the time to prepare for it, it may be more cost effective and actually work out better in the long run to use green screen or use other technologies. So know that this isn't an all or nothing. If you just used a virtual production tool for your location scout, you're using virtual production. So know that there's a lot of ways to leverage the technology. And just like every new technology innovation we have, there's always this amazing tool that people want to use, and it takes a while for all of the connectivity and interoperability to catch up. For those of you who are around from going from standard definition to high definition, from film capture to digital capture, this is something that isn't new. This is a very, very kind of typical technology innovation cycle. The only difference is it's evolving really, really, really fast, right? And so not all of the connectivity is there. And as we find that technology changes, what we think of as a standard or what we need to have solved may not represent what it did 10, 15, 50, 100 years ago. So the process through that we're doing through Rapid Industry Solutions is also understanding like what do we need to do as an industry as a whole to come together and provide the types of tools that are useful without inhibiting creativity and flexibility and innovation, but also provide at least some sort of paved road that maybe has some lights so that we all can be traveling in the same direction and use whatever vehicle or method of transportation we want to use to be able to tell our stories. And we all know it as from behind the scenes or in front of the camera, ultimately it's about allowing creative teams to tell the story the way they want to tell their story. And so the use of tools, you know, virtual production could be somehow using AR tools in TikTok or Snapchat. And that person who's doing that now, creating something at home is going to bring that to your virtual production stage sometime very soon. I see Sheiva like shaking, but sometime very soon to say, I want to do this on a big volume. So know that it is very obviously rapidly changing and morphs. The other thing, if you take a step back just a little bit, is that this is kind of the entryway into the metaverse. You're creating digital assets. So there were questions about what resolution should we use and what should we do? There is a difference between what you could create in some of these game engine technologies and what resolution and maybe what practically right now can be actually rendered in real time to make things work. So right now you might have to make a sacrifice, as Nicole mentioned, to go down in pixel pitch or have something more out of focus because just the computing doesn't keep up with it. So know that there are some limitations that way. But as you think forward, we all get to think like we're a big brand now. So if you're going to create an asset in your VAD that could be used, remember that what you're using it for now, in a year from now, 2 years from now, that asset could be your feature film. It could be your interactive live venue presentation. You could sell it as an NFT or other type of asset for use in another production. So just, again, this planning idea is what we've found over and over again for participants in this ecosystem. We have a lot of small things to fix, and it's going to take, we can't boil the ocean, so it's going to take time to put those together, but know that it has a future beyond just a single use and being able to get your vision on the screen for your first vision. There are many, many, many visions. Ultimately, again, everyone is invited to participate in Rapid Industry Solutions. You can either do it as an observer. One of the goals with Rapid Industry Solutions is to sponsor the work, whether that be standards or we're planning an interactive platform based on that wall chart I showed you earlier. And we're pushing out as much of this as we can at no charge to the industry so that we are actually able to provide these solutions in a way that allows people to use it right away. So if you're not a SMPTE member, you've never looked at anything before, if you go to that wall chart, you can access it, download it as many times as you want. It's there for free for the betterment of the industry. If you want to get more involved, you certainly can contact me. You can go to the SMPTE, the landing page, and watch as some of these new developments come through. We also have a project management office, and we welcome individual contributors. We welcome companies. We have multiple educational institutions that are involved. So if you're connected with your alma mater and you know that there are students there who could be interested in this, there may be a way to work with them to become a SMPTE chapter, student chapter, and get access to this, and also for the faculty to be involved. So we have institutions like RIT, USC, UCLA, and others that are involved internationally, Whistling Woods in India. We have Solent in the UK and others. So there's many, many ways to participate. And for those people who are part of nonprofits or other industry organizations, if you're a nonprofit, there's no charge to be part of RIS. For companies that are for profit, we ask for them to help with the sponsorship. But know that we listen and hear all the feedback, and what has been coming through to all of our participants are those are the kind of questions that we all need to hear as an industry so that we can start to actually answer those questions and provide the tools that you need. And it could be very possible that what you bring up is something we hadn't heard before. So I really do want to thank all of you for the opportunity to share this information, to give this kind of starting point. At least hopefully maybe everyone we've leveled out a little bit so that everybody is talking at a certain level, and certainly we will look forward to presenting many more updates as time goes on. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Brian and to Tema.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are absolutely thrilled that everybody was able to join us today. It was a really wonderful, wonderful panel. I would like to tell you a little bit about what's going on with women in media. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kari. It was so great to hear from everybody. So what a wealth of knowledge, an incredible group of folks who joined us today. I would like to tell you a little bit about what we have coming up with women in media. So we have the Zeiss Altitude Awards. It's for women and gender nonconforming cinematographers, gaffers, and camera operators who can apply to win thousands of dollars in cash money and Zeiss lenses. We have esteemed judges from the ASC, Paramount Studios, and Howard University looking at applicants' body of work, which is really cool. We're going to be at Cinegear in LA this year with our own booth and announcing the WIM and Zeiss Altitude Award winners. There may even be a party. A link is in the chat. On April 28th, we will be hosting an Instagram for Beginners virtual workshop. It will be fun and easy, and it will be a great way to get started and learn best tips and tricks for ruling the Instagrams. And believe it or not, you cannot actually break the internet. The class is limited, so be sure to get your tickets before they're all gone. Please join our members at NAB in Las Vegas, the creative team for one of our films that we shot this past summer as part of the Camaraderie Initiative will be in the ARI space with actually a volumetric stage. So you're going to want to check that out. The director and the visual effects folks from Moon are going to be there. You're going to definitely want to check that out. We've added a link in the chat to learn more about the Camaraderie Initiative. If you are not a member of Women in Media yet, we would love for you to join us. We do have memberships for men, women, all genders, and we would love for you to come along to more educational events much like this. I would like to thank this incredible panel. You folks are just, you know, we've all grown our IQs by at least, I don't know, 10, 15 points today. So thank you so much. And I would really, really like to thank Brian Kobylarz at SMPTE for co-hosting this event with me, as well as Scotty Jeanette Madden, everybody who has been involved. Thank you so much. Please welcome Brian back.
Well, hello, and thank you again, Tema. And thank you so much to all the panelists. I mean, we could not have picked a better group of people to give us a good intro to volumetric. It's been absolutely amazing. I'm enthralled, and I wish that this could go on for another hour or two. But you can see now the SMPTE.org website, which is also in the chat. I do want to encourage anybody, if you want to find out more about SMPTE, please check us out there. If you're not a member, there are opportunities in that regard. We have coming events, not only for New York, but the entire SMPTE organization that are available in the upcoming events. And again, an absolute pleasure for everybody to be with us. I did want to also just thank our sustaining sponsor and the Friends of SMPTE, who end up making programs like this possible through their sponsorship. Again, a pleasure to see everybody today, and keep your questions coming into both Tema, myself, and especially Kari, so this way we can address anything future in the industry. Thank you again.
I'd like to make a special thank you to Nicole Voss, Kristin Turnipseed, and Sheiva Khalily from Lux Machina, Leysan Khabibullina from Happy Mushroom, Kari Grubin, I'm sure I got that wrong. Kari Grubin from SMPTE RIS OSVP. And like I said, a big thank you to Scotty Jeanette Madden and Brian Kobylarz. Thank you, everybody. If you have more questions, I think we can hang out for like a second more, even though our event technically is over. So if you'd like to stick around for a minute, I think that's okay.
We can run the clock. Scotty, if you want to pick out anything that was in the chat that we didn't address. And
well, first of all, one question that we kept bunny hopping over is, where did the term volume in this conversation come from?
No, I think the volume came from, it's a volume of LED, right? So an LED wall is a 2D, it's one plane. Volume is kind of, if you add another, you know, leg to it, now it's a volume. That's really where it came from.
Yeah, I think it kind of originated from like in mocap terms. So I think if you look to like motion capture, yeah, if you look back to like motion capture spaces, they'll probably have the origin of it. But for virtual production specifically, it was probably a term that was hijacked from like a motion capture volume into an LED volume, the space.
And now everybody says our volume, their volume, that volume over there.
Mm-hmm. And that volume goes to 11 and yeah.
Why don't you just make 10 louder? No, it's okay.
Mhm.
Anyways, Sheiva, someone's asking how small, when you say a smallish studio for that was a fascinating star today. How small was it?
We have a test volume in our space that is like 15 by 12 feet. So getting much smaller than that is tough, but we have looked at, like, we have used smaller volumes in cases like stop motion, or, you know, if your subject's smaller, your volume can be smaller. So it's really dependent on your project, but ultimately, like in this space, you can't really shoot more than 2 people at a time, because you do want to maintain a distance between your subject and your LED to prevent moiré.
Question from Sam Grove. How do you deal with floors and shadows on the floors?
Well, like in a volume space, often, you know, one of the great things about it is that you could bring in, you know, production design and art department to set dress kind of your space. So, I mean, any of your lighting is going to cast shadows on your floor. Not only that, but like lighting from the LED wall is not going to necessarily replace the need for practical lights. It's supplemental. So any lighting people in here as well, like this is not to replace those jobs or those positions or those elements of an on set. It's supplemental to it. So you're still gonna, you know, kind of use your practical lights. You'll get shadows. There are ways to project light into the Unreal scene, such as like a flashlight, where you can like track a flashlight and get that to interact with the 3D content on the wall. But when it comes to actual shadows on the floors and stuff, you're still going to get those as you would have those created by like practical light, or if there's, you know, something that's being cast onto the floor, it'll still cast those shadows from your sidewall, as well as creative use of production design and art department to get your physical floor to flow smoothly into the wall. Often it's with uses of things like rocks, grass, anything of the set that can kind of hide the seam. And then from there, you know, you can kind of region color correct if there's like one spot that just kind of needs a little bit of help to help sell the depth of the transition to the wall. There's a lot of different techniques that can be used for that though.
Yeah, I think having an organic transition between the virtual world and the real world patterns and stuff are really difficult to reproduce. But then there's also some stages where we actually have like a video floor, and there's a lot of tricks that we can use to create shadows for that sort of thing, or use the perspective of the camera to create some other floor that they're walking on, a lot like the League of Legends project.
And this is where collaboration between VAD and Machina is really important, because you need to have those reviews where our content goes on the wall and you can figure out what looks good. And then our collaboration with practical department is super important, again, to make that transition super seamless, whether it's placing rocks and foliage, or sometimes it's like a floor pattern that has to go into content, or maybe it's something practical that continues on to the content. So those reviews are super, super important. We have to collaborate very closely to make sure it all looks good.
Yeah, like no department in virtual production works in a silo. It works best when everyone gets a chance to work together. And like Leysan said, like the sooner that our two departments can start talking to each other, and then also loop in art department, production designer, DP, VFX, all of them, the sooner that can happen on a production, typically the better or the smoother the process goes, because then everyone has eyes on that element, or, you know, what the solution is needed for, you know, this aspect of the show.
I think we're going to wrap it up, folks. Thank you so much. We appreciate everybody for coming, especially Sheiva, Kristin, Nicole, Leysan, Kari. Thank you so much. What a pleasure, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
One last thing from me is it was an oversight on my part. One other person we need to thank very much is Wes Simpson, who did all the tech for this, the switching. Thank you, Wes. So much appreciated.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great Saturday, everybody. Happy weekend. We'll see you hopefully at NAB and Cinegear. Hopefully we'll see folks there. in the very near future and in person, hopefully.
And visit our websites. Have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.